Hey Grias, welcome to a late night special with your girl Alexis. I'm your host, and this is Lex Gria's podcast. And today I wanted to do like a mini series in regards of a special holiday that obviously, like any other holiday, we all know Black History gets overlooked numerous times, but this right here is a big deal. You know why? Because so many people have actually came together and celebrate, not just Black people, but all nations celebrate this day as a whole to embrace what our ancestors or even people that were in that time frame when there wasn't that freedom. So today episode we are going to dive into no other than Juneteenth because it is a big deal and it's a special holiday, and I feel like it needs to have shown people the highlights of it and what it really is about, because I think a lot of people have a misconception about Black history and Juneteenth being the same, or Juneteenth being similar to 4th of July, but no. So let's dive into what is Juneteenth and the highlights of what it is today. So, Juneteenth is a holiday that celebrates the freedom of enslaved African Americans, and Juneteenth is a combination word, June and 19th, that was established on the day Major General Gordon Grandy declared an order for the freedom of all slaves in Texas. And then 2 years after this proclamation, the day was not seen as a federal holiday until 2021. So you know how we have all these federal holidays and then everyone gets off and whatnot there, right? So Juneteenth was not one of them, because there's times where I've worked and then there's times like I think last year I had the choice to not work or didn't work, even though it was a federal holiday. But I was also a contractor, so that would be another thing. So unfortunately, if there's nobody else to cover, I will have to work. But besides that, you see the history. This day has become a day since 1865, and it's now considered a federal holiday in 2021. Just think of that. Just think to yourself and like, okay, why is it taking so long and everything? So with this holiday, also known as Freedom Day, Black Independence Day, you name it. So obviously the history behind it is from what it says on here from the National Museum of African American History, is that on Freedom Eve, or even Eve of January 1st, 1863, the first watch night service took place. On that night, enslaved and free African Americans gather in churches and private homes all across country, awaiting news that the proclamation that where someone would come, one of the governors would have taken effect. So this was going all across. It happened in Texas, but it didn't happen all at once. So they were waiting for that moment. And the stroke of midnight, prayers were answered as all enslaved people in Confederate states were declared legally free. So mind you, from what my knowledge is and from what I've learned from others, is that when this happened, especially in Confederate states like Mississippi, Alabama, like mainly the southern places and stuff, you had to think about this. If the slaves were free, that means there was no them doing housework, there was no them going in the fields anymore. That means all the people that had used them to do their work essentially were now having to do it themselves. And I know from hearing from other people that they weren't too fond about it and they try to, in a way, get it back to where it was. But unfortunately, when something like this happens, especially if it gets declared, it's like permanent. Like anything else in like history or even like governor, if it's declared, it's sticking. It's not going away. You can't just go up to the governor and say, "Hey, can you change your mind about this?" No, they made up their mind. They declared it. It's happening. You're gonna have to suck it up. So, of course, Union soldiers, many of whom were black, marched onto plantations across the city in the South, reading small copies of the proclamation, spreading the news of freedom. So it was kind of like a parade, essentially, is how I see it. And I just feel like it's a way of like letting people know, like, hey, you're good. You're able to like walk. You're able to not like deal with this anymore. It's almost like how we treat our work, you know? Like if you're not happy somewhere, just walk or just say, "Hey, like I'm not doing this anymore." So only through the 13th Amendment did they free end slavery throughout the United States. So it is now legally on an amendment, and as today, but not everyone in Confederate territory would be immediately be free. Like I said before, it was kind of like a iffy situation. But later on in 1863, it was made effective. It could not be implanted in places still under Confederate control. As a result, in the westernmost Confederate state of Texas, enslaved people would not be freed until much later. Freedom finally came on June 19th, 1865, where some 2,000 UN troopers arrived in Galveston Bay, Texas. The Army announced that more than 250,000 enslaved black people in the state were freed by executive decree. This day came to be known as Juneteenth by the newly freed people in Texas. So even though people hate on Texas, but hey, this is where it first started, so you kind of got to give them their plausible, and I'm hoping that they do celebrate it in that magnitude where they remember this day because it's on their landmark, you know what I mean? But hey, I don't know in regards of how they celebrate it, but I know as like being in Virginia for so long and seeing all the things that have occurred over the news and all the things that has happened, it seems like today is that day to embrace another moment. And of course, you don't have to celebrate something like this on the day of because it embraces you as a person or just embraces your history or your everything. You can celebrate every day, any day, and all that. This is just a highlight. And that's what we want to just remind people, especially those that don't understand what this means to me or even other people that are African American descent. And I just feel like we need to educate each other as a whole and not one sided or be biased or anything. Because I want people to know what they need to know. If they need to know the basics, they need to know the basics. If they need to understand what it means to us, because like everybody has that holiday that they treat it like maybe a religious or maybe they go in depth. And like this is just a holiday to celebrate our freedom, essentially, and to remember how it started, when it started, and where it started. And today, actually, when I went to dance class today, they actually wrote this on here that the same stuff that I mentioned of the slaves being freedom in Texas, as well as the 2 years after the day was not seen as a federal holiday until 2021. So that was like around close to maybe COVID and probably when everything was going down. But the celebration of this day can be traced back as early as 1866. And we are so blessed that today we can celebrate the freedom through dance. So, like, of course, I just got out of dance class, and my homegirl Ashley taught a dance. as well as made it into a big celebration. And we had some good food. So it was just definitely like a good vibe, good energy, a good way to like celebrate just everything. And of course, it was like many different type of race as well as nationalities with us. So it wasn't just one sided. Like I said, this is a holiday to enlighten, not to say, hey, this is our holiday, you have your holiday. Like, no, this is just a celebration of knowing that this is the day that African Americans, enslaved African, and free Africans were actually freed. And for now, that is all that I have for you guys. But I hope that you guys did celebrate this holiday, and I hope that you did get to learn something a little bit. I know it was a little bit quick, but it is late at night, and I know some of you guys have work tomorrow, like myself. But I just wanted to embrace my feedback and my knowledge of what I learned and everything. And the information that I did give you guys is based on the museum in DC, also known as the African American History Museum. I highly recommend anyone that wants to know more of history on that, definitely go out there because it is a lot of information, and it would take you maybe a couple of days or even maybe a week to actually digest all of that information and to remember most of it so you can share with others. And again, happy Freedom Day, happy Juneteenth, and Alexis is checking out. Bye, guys, and I hope you guys stay tuned for other future episodes. This was just a mini series to enlighten and highlight a special holiday. Bye.